Good afternoon, Pak Adi.
Good afternoon, Anissa. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Adi, for joining us on the Blue Ocean Speaker Series. How are you today? I know you've been very busy.
Yeah, it's an honor for me to be in this stage. I think it's a good time for me to learn also by sharing some insights on what we do in the government in the energy sector.
Yes, we are really looking forward to hear from your presentations. But before we deep dive into it, maybe you can share a little bit about yourself, and maybe you can share what kind of projects in energy policy that you are working with the minister currently.
Yeah, I've been working, so the energy sector is, to be honest, relatively new for me. I've been in the energy sector for 7 months right now, because previously I worked in the investment ministry.
Okay.
But then again, it's an interesting time to work in the energy sector because we are in the critical, like you said, it's a critical time where we are transition from the fossil fuel, fossil energy, into the renewable energy, new and renewable energy. At the same time, we live in a world where the world is getting fragmented. They said that the globalization right now is dead. And also, meanwhile, the government is also pushing not only about the energy security, but also on the downstreaming sector. So both are in the area where the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources do, which mostly I do every day, working with energy policy on how we manage imports of oil, imports on LPG, and also how to attract more and more investment into the downstreaming sectors and also into the energy sectors. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's always been a dilemma between how we meet our energy needs, how we reduce the import, how we can improve our downstreamings. And today I'm sure that you will sharing a lot of things on each sector, maybe from the oil and gas and the mineral resources or even the EV, the future of EV. I think some of the team is really excited to hear what's the future for Indonesia. Because we are the biggest, one of the biggest, or the biggest maybe, for the nickels producer, right?
Yeah, true. We are the biggest producer of nickel, and we do have the biggest resources of nickel. But we'll talk more about that later.
Okay. I will not asking questions for now, so I will turn to the keynote for Mr. Adi Prasetyo regarding the future of Indonesia's energy policy and opportunities for you. So the time is yours, Mr. Adi.
Thank you. Should I use the... So good afternoon, everyone. I hope we will be having a nice session. Afterwards, I believe there will be a Q&A session, right? You can ask anything ranging from energy policy or even investment, because I used to work in the Ministry of Investment. But now let me share you a little bit about what is the current policy of Indonesia energy sector. Not working. Yeah. So if you're talking about the government priority, so in the leadership of the President Prabowo, he said he has 8 aspiration, or we call it Astacita. And this 8 aspiration set as a guideline for the government of President Prabowo for the next 5 years. 2 of them are highly related to the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources. The first one will be the security of the energy security, which is currently the sector that ESDM held. And the second one will be the downstreaming industry, which also is led by the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, Pak Bahlil, as the task force, national task force for downstreaming. So when we're talking about the energy, when we're talking about the energy sector, the current state of the energy in Indonesia, we cannot we should start with our oil condition. So right now, Indonesia use about more than 500 million of barrels of oil each year, or translates to about 1.5 million barrels of oils per day, which we produce by ourselves is only about 600,000 barrels per day. So we import about 900,000 of oil every day, or about 313 million barrels of oil every year. Most of it goes to the transportation sector. So most of the oil we burn is used for cars, for bicycles. The second biggest would be the industry sector. They use it mostly as the fuel and also for feedstock. The next big thing is electricity, and the least one is the aviation sector. This import costs our foreign exchange each year more than 500 trillion rupiah, or about $30 billion of foreign exchange we lost to these oil imports. So that's why one of the main policies that the president asked for us, the Ministry of Energy, to do is to increase the oil lifting. So the oil lifting, like I said, it's been on decline since 1998. In 1998, we used to produce about 1.6 billion of barrel of oil per day. Right now, it's only 600,000 of barrel of oil. So we are targeting to increase that output into 900,000 of barrel of oil by the end of the period of President Prabowo, which is on 2029. Yeah. So how do we increase that production? We use optimization with technology. We will try to apply fracking, horizontal drilling. I don't know if any of you have some sub-major in the petroleum engineering, but it's something that new technology that has been proven in the US, and we are bringing that to here in Indonesia. Hopefully we can increase the production of oil here in our country. And the second one will be the reactivation of the idle wells. We have about more than 4,000 wells that are right now currently not producing. This will be, we will work together with SMEs and also local cooperation to reactivate those wells, and hopefully it can add more to our oil production. The last one is the long-term one, is to do more exploration, mainly on the eastern part of the Indonesia. So around the Banda Sea, near Maluku and Papua, that's where we are looking for a new areas for oil. Wait, not working. Yeah, and like I said before, one of the key issue that we have is not only import of oil, but also import of LPGs. Maybe you've heard the national issue in February where the LPG supply in Indonesia is quite, it became rare, and then it became a national issue. So everyone is mad with our minister because it became a meme, I know. Maybe some of you have heard the meme, the anomaly of Lil Bahlil. Yeah. So this became an issue, a major issue of our government. So we import about almost 7 million ton of LPG each year, mostly from the US. while our production is only almost 2 million metric ton, and mostly all of the LPG that we use is in the form of subsidized. So the government spent about 80 trillion rupiah to subsidize LPG. This is something that we probably will have to regulate in the future to make it more efficient. So to decrease import, we are planning to do downstreaming in the DME. So it's the methyl ether. The methyl ether is a form of gas that can be used to substitute the LPG. It can be downstream or produced from coal chemical gasification. The second one would be to build a gas network to house. As you may know, gas network is not available to all of the Indonesian people, right? So most of them only available to people in the cities. So the government is planning to build more gas network in order to decrease our needs on the LPG imports. The last one would be to increase the production of LPG based on our available oil field. This is the plan for the government to build more gas network. We plan to build in the next 5 years. We plan to add more than almost 5 million more gas network connection. This will be built on the government budget. Hopefully it can decrease the import of LPG by 500,000 tons per year. So when we're talking about, like I said, why we talk about oil and gas before, so when we're talking about energy, it has to be about, it has to be just, we cannot just talk about saving the environment without talking about saving the people. So when we're talking about renewable energy, it's something that not everyone can have access to. So energy needs to be available and affordable for all the people. So that's why the subsidy policy in the future probably will be modified so it can be more effective and well targeted. And energy needs to be also available for the industry, so they can create more jobs for people. That's why we are still talking about the oil and also the gas. But in the future, we are planning to build more and more renewable energy because it's something inevitable. New and renewable energy, definitely the price is going down in the future. So when we're talking about the potential of the renewable energy in Indonesia, we have a lot of solar here in Indonesia. We have a lot of potential for wind, for hydro, bioenergy, and geothermal. For your information, we are the biggest, we are the #1 nation with geothermal potential in Indonesia, in the world. So this is something that hasn't been released to the public yet, but I'm going to share it for you here. So in the next RUPTL is the plan by PLN to build, is the 10-year plan of PLN in building electricity. 75% of it will be renewables, new and renewable energy. Mostly we will build more solar energy and also battery energy system. And geothermal will also play a bigger role in the future. So why we are talking about why we are working on more and more renewables, it's not only because we care about the environment, but it also something that we need to push investment in Indonesia. Because when you're talking about investment, so to bring jobs, we need to bring more investment. We need to build more factories in Indonesia, and those factories they want green and clean energy. So right now, when you are talking to investors, the first thing they always ask is, do you have a good supply of green energy? That's why I believe that Singapore also approached Indonesia. They asked us to export renewable energy there because it's something that definitely we need in the future. The second one would be about jobs. So maybe for you, those who didn't know, the energy sector, the jobs in the energy sector is not that big actually compared to what we have from industry. So when we are talking about industry like shoe factory or clothing factory, they will provide a lot of jobs, typically in the thousands or 10,000s of jobs opening. But for energy sector, let's say if you build a coal power plant, the jobs that they can take is maybe just in the hundreds. But when you're talking about renewable energy, the green jobs that this renewable energy provide is really a lot compared to what fossil fuel energy have. So in the next 10 years, the electricity sector alone will provide about 1.2 million jobs, 1.2 million new jobs, just from the electricity sector alone. And that's only for the electricity that PLN will provide. And those private sectors can add a lot of more jobs in the renewable energy sectors. That's why it's becoming more and more important for us to push new and renewable energy. And when we're talking about jobs creation, we cannot stop at energy. The most important thing is to talk about the downstreaming industry. So this is the most important thing that the government right now is working on, besides makan bergizi gratis, of course. So the downstreaming industry is expected until 2040 is expected to bring more than 3 million jobs. This will add more than 200 billion of GDP, USD of GDP each year to Indonesia. So when we're talking about downstreaming, most of them will be done in the mineral and the coal sectors, also in the oil and gas. But most of the jobs created will be on the plantation, on the fisheries, on the forestry. This is something that the youth can do, because mostly it will be done by SMEs. And the government is right now planning to build a lot of the downstreaming efforts, which the youth can take part of. So when we're talking about like downstreaming and also new energy, the best thing is to talk about battery. Why battery? Because like what Anissa said before, we are the #1 producer of nickel, which for NMC type of battery is the main component. So 40% of the cost of an EV car is in the battery. And 80% of the cost of that battery is in the nickel. So that's why nickel became more important for the downstreaming effort. So those who came from the mechanical engineering, I think you're in luck, because right now the material science is one of the most hot sectors that the world is talking about, and because the world is shifting from the internal combustion car into the EV car. They said that lately with the US government and the Europe government is shifting more, stop their shift to EV, that it will be the doom of the EV car. But I don't believe so, because as the momentum, the young people, I believe you guys are more inclined into owning an electric car, right? Electric car is defined as a status symbol right now compared to internal combustion car. And I believe the momentum is there. So I think in the future, more and more jobs will be created in the EV sectors, in the battery sectors, and the government is also pushing into that areas. And hopefully we can create more jobs for youth, and this is something also the campus can join also the effort, because this is even though it's been 10 years, but compared to what ICE have been, conventional cars has been doing for the last couple hundred of years, this sector is still new. That's why I think we still have a lot of exciting times ahead. I think that's all from me. Maybe we can talk more into the discussion session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pak Adi, for the insightful presentations. I think all of us just have a very important information that you just shared, even it's still not public yet, yeah, Pak Adi. Is it sensitive to be shared today?
It's okay.
Thank you so much. So actually, I have many questions, but I will start with 2 questions because I would like to have also the questions from the audience. The first questions, recently in the media, there are a views about the oil import in Indonesia. And you've already shared in reality that our import value is bigger compared to our oil productions.
Yeah.
And even the LPG as well, right? And then I see that there is a great initiative from the ministry to improve our oil productions, to improve our oil lifting. Like you mentioned, it's already declined from 1990.
Yeah.
So how can we make sure that the ministry initiative to improve our oil productions align with the intentions from our private companies to make sure, for example, if there are any regulations that we can limit the private companies to have more import in the next decade?
Yeah, I think so. The policy of the government is that we can limit how much import. So the import of oil and gas should go to the Ministry of Energy first. So we issue the license to import oil and gas. So it's something that we can do to limit the oil production. But then again, the oil imports. But then again, we have to make sure that we can increase the import of our oil production first, and also building a good refining capabilities in our oil refinery. Because even if we produce oils and we do not have the refinery that can refine the oils into gasoline and also gas oil, it will be not much of use, right? You still have to export all the oil and get the gas oil and gasoline back for use. So it's something that we definitely can do. But then our first priority would be to increase our lifting first, and also making sure that our refinery can process that oil.
Okay, thank you, Padi. So I think we also have a challenge on the infrastructure of the refinery itself.
True.
So far the capacity of our refinery, could you share more about it?
So right now the capacity of our refinery here in Indonesia is about 1 million barrels oils per day.
Per day, okay.
But not all of our refinery can can produce, can work on their maximum capacity. So these refineries, they have their own specification, which may be not suitable for the oil produced here in Indonesia. That's why we still import a lot of crude. So that's why the government is also planning to build more refinery in the future.
Okay. I think that's very enlightening for us because it's not only about import-export, but we need to also prepare how can Indonesia's refinery also be ready to produce our own oil or from crude. So the next question is about the dilemma between sustainability goals and also our big growth from the coal and minerals. You share on the presentations that I think almost 400 billions rupiah from the mineral and also coal itself. But we have the sustainability goals. How do we balance this kind of approach to reach our sustainability goals?
Yeah, so if I'm not mistaken, based on our approach to net zero emission, the most contributor would be on the FOLU. So right now, there is a lot of emission is coming from the land usage. So forestry that got burned, and also pit land that should store carbon dioxide is being used as a plantation, which release their captured CO2. It's something that's on the Ministry of Forestry and Ministry of Environment sectors to do. In SDM, what we can do is to push more renewables. Like I said before, 75% of our next power plant to be built by PLN is going to be new and renewable energy. So that's why we plan to decommission coal-fired power plant also. So that's the effort that the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources do in the future. But if we're talking about coal and oil, I don't believe we will be free of them in the short term, because even then, like I said, what Trump said a couple months ago is drill, baby, drill. So it will be quite foolish not. It's not that we will go back to that, because like I said, industry, investor, they ask for green energy. So it definitely still going on that way, but we are not going to leave our oil and coal behind in the short term, I think.
Yeah, so we are not going back only just to rely on the.
Yeah, we will be going a little bit slower, but
Okay.
we were still going forward.
Okay, that's interesting to hear. So because I think also the coal and minerals offer a lot of jobs, because you mentioned the oil and gas itself is not provide enough job, but the minings of the minerals and coals.
They do provide a significant jobs in total, but compared to the investment size, it's not that much actually. That's why we built downstreaming industry, because the industry itself will provide a lot of value added, which will create a lot of jobs. So when we're talking about mining, usually if you go to Kalimantan, to the area where there's a lot of coal mine, you will see a lot of gaps. There will be a lot of gaps between the so-called Pak Haji or the miner.
Haji Syam,
They
ya?
look very rich, right? And the locals are not very, they still poor. But if you go to the Morowali area, or you go to Weda Bay area, where they build a downstreaming industry based on nickel, you will see a lot of prosper happening, because they build a lot of industry there. From those industry, there will be a lot of jobs, not only in the industry itself, but the locals can build warung makan. They can build a laundry service. They build a kos-kosan, a lot of homestays, hotels. This in turn could create more and more jobs. So when I went to Morowali a year or 2 years ago, I'm talking with one of the locals, and they said that they used, before the industry came, they used to make about 3 or 4 million rupiah a month from agriculture or fisheries. Now they said that on a bad month, they made about 70 to 80 million because the industry came, not because he worked in an industry, but they can create business to support the industry. That's why.
Okay, interesting because you mentioned industries, and we are also talking about the sustainability actions that the companies and industry is doing. Is there any incentive or some regulations that can push the private companies or industry to work towards the sustainability as well?
Well, we do have the regulation for the companies to decrease their own carbon footprints, mainly in an energy management aspect. So the Ministry of Energy also released a regulation that manage on how good companies should manage their energy usage. For example, we started a rating system where electronics should have some certain of energy efficiency. It's something that we manage also here. But I think there's already a regulation that I have to be blunt, but for the government hasn't really restrict on how much emission a company can release now. We already limited the emission for coal-fired power plant, but that's it. The other sectors hasn't been that managed yet, I think.
Okay, interesting. So I would like to open the questions to the audience, but there is one last question, which I'm curious about the EV investment.
Okay.
Could you give us some updates on the investment so far? Is there any big companies who already invested? Maybe some of us still not hearing the news, or is there any impact on the US tariff in terms of the investments on the EV industry?
Well, when we're talking about EV, the car itself, I think, I don't know if any of you have read the news, but there's been a lot of investment coming here to Indonesia. The first one will be the Hyundai from Korea. They already invest like $2 billion into their factory in Karawang, where they produce Ioniq and Kona. I think it's already quite big. The second one will be Wuling, which built their factory in Cikarang. I think it's quite big also. It's 1.3 billion US dollars. And right now we are having a lot of investment from Chinese car makers. The big one will be BYD, which already start building their factory in Subang, I think. And it should be, their plan is to start producing the car by the end of this year. And we also have VinFast planning to build on Subang also. And the other companies are still waiting to see how the market goes. But I believe that there will be a lot of investment in the EV sectors. But when you are talking about EV, you cannot stop there. You also have to talk about the battery. So for the battery, maybe some of you read the news that LG stopped their investment. So that is not the case. LG already has a factory in Karawang. They have invested about $2.5 billion for a 10 gigawatt battery cell there. The next one will be CATL, which already start building their own factory in Karawang also. They are planning to build 7.5 gigawatt of battery cell capacity. But this one, the unique thing about CATL is that they are building from really the upstream. So they start by mining nickels, and they smelt that nickel into the, it's called nickel sulfate, a downstream product of a nickel. This nickel sulfate then will be used to build the cathode for the battery. So the cathode will be sent to Karawang factory to build battery cell here. So when the project finish in 5 years time, we will have a battery factory that is 100% Indonesia made.
Wow, that's very great news. So just follow-up questions.
Sure.
The response to the, you mentioned LG stopped the investment. Is there anything happens because of our regulations or something from US tariff?
I think it's more about the decision by the LG because it's hard to compete in the battery sector right now because the demand, like I said before, there's some kind of slowdown in the EV sectors. So the demand is slowing down. So that's why they are, you have to know that the South Korean is not very cost competitive compared to the Chinese counterpart. So they are stopping their investment. It's more because of the business consideration.
I see.
But the government already find a substitute for the investment. We will be working with Huayou and EV battery from China to replace that canceled investment.
Okay. Thank you so much, Padi. I think this is very interesting discussions, and I'm sure a lot of you has already also prepared some questions. I would like to open the floor. If you have any questions, please raise your hand so we could discuss with Pak Adi. Do not be shy. Okay.
Yeah, please.
So please, maybe the team could help.
Okay. I just want to make sure. I will ask you in Bahasa Indonesia, Pak,
Sure.
because my English is very
It's
good.
okay.
I'm afraid you will confuse with my English. Oke, Pak, begini. Sebelumnya dikatakan bahwa kita sedang menuju kepada renewable energy gitu. Nah, pertanyaannya adalah apakah kita masyarakat tetap harus percaya tentang bahwa pemerintah memang sedang berjalan untuk menuju ke renewable energy. Sementara fossil fuel itu masih sangat seksi, bisnis yang sangat seksi, dan bahkan banyak sekali orang-orang di pemerintahan kita masih punya interest, punya kepentingan di sana, termasuk menterinya Bapak juga punya kepentingan di sana, dan juga para pebisnis ini punya power yang sangat kuat di pemerintahan kita. Nah, pertanyaannya adalah kita masyarakat yang tidak punya power untuk hal ini, apakah kita masih percaya akan bahwa pemerintah akan menuju ke sana atau hal-hal dan kebijakan ini, policy ini hanya akan berakhir di media atau ruang akademis. Terima kasih, Pak.
Should I answer in bahasa or in English?
Bahasa aja, bahasa.
It's okay?
Iya.
It's okay.
Jadi mungkin bahasa aja ya biar lebih enak ya. Jadi kalau tadi bicara ya apakah kebijakan ini hanya akan jadi bunga-bunga atau istilahnya Pak Presiden itu omon-omon saja gitu ya. Jadi kalau memang selama ini renewable itu tuh hanya pembicaraan saja. Yang terjadi itu sebetulnya karena ini kesalahan kebijakan pemerintah juga. Sebenarnya bukan kebijakan yang salah sih, tapi ya marketnya kondisi global tidak sebagus yang diperkirakan ya. Jadi 10 tahun yang lalu kita mungkin pernah dengar program 35 gigawatt, itu kita bangun banyak sekali pembangkit listrik tenaga uap PLTU, dengan harapan pertumbuhan ekonomi itu cukup tinggi, waktu itu 8% lebih lah. Namun ternyata kan pertumbuhan ekonominya tidak secepat itu karena kondisi juga nggak memungkinkan. Secara global juga nggak mungkin karena kan ya tidak sebagus yang diperkirakan sebelumnya. Kemudian yang terjadi adalah PLN itu menghadapi posisi di mana mereka itu oversupply listrik dari PLTU yang mereka sudah bangun. Kemudian tentu dengan oversupply ini menjadi PLN itu tidak bisa mengembangkan energi hijau yang lebih banyak. Akibatnya selama 10 tahun terakhir bisa dibilang minuscule sekali ya, terlalu kecil lah bauran energi RI kita. Itu cuma di 10 tahun ke depan, seperti tadi saya sudah sampaikan, di RUU PTL yang akan terbit, itu 75% itu adalah energi baru dan terbarukan dan energi storage. Dan ini pasti saya nggak bilang 100% ya, tapi most likely akan direalisasikan. Kenapa? Seperti yang tadi sudah saya sampaikan, demand dari industri sendiri itu tuh memang minta gitu. Jadi kita ketika bicara sama katakan data center yang mau investasi di Indonesia, hal pertama yang mereka tanya adalah kalian punya suplai energi bersih nggak? Ketika kita bicara sama pabrik mobil, pabrik baterai, investasi dari Nike, Adidas, hal pertama mereka tanya adalah suplai energi bersihnya ada nggak? Maka dari itu menjadi sangat penting buat Indonesia untuk membangun energi baru dan terbarukan. Karena tanpa energi baru terbarukan, kita nggak akan kompetitif untuk menarik investasi. Begitu. Itu yang pertama. Yang kedua adalah, tadi seperti yang sudah saya sampaikan, EBT ini nggak cuma sebagai sumber energi, tapi dia juga bisa menjadi sumber lapangan kerja. Kenapa? Karena ketika kita dorong EBT, kita juga mau nggak mau bisa menarik pabrik solar panel ke sini. Kita bisa tarik pabrik wind turbine ke sini. Dan itu akan membuka lapangan kerja yang lebih luas dan juga mendorong industrialisasi kita. Seperti itu sih.
Semoga menjawab ya.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Pak Adi untuk jawabannya. Saya rasa cukup menjawab. Selanjutnya masih
Anything
ada.
else?
Oh ada.
Back on
Silakan.
the back.
Okay, so good afternoon, Pa. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Nadia. I'm a second-year mechanical engineering student. So I feel like lately there's been a lot of talk about green jobs. And as a mechanical engineering student, I often wonder, like, maybe what kinds of roles in the field are actually realistic for someone like me or someone like me later when I'm gonna graduate later? Like, what kind of jobs are possible? And we know that the energy sector might be quite expensive. So do you have any insights on where I can realistically begin, especially later as a fresh graduate and in Indonesia? So I guess that's the question from me. Thank you.
Yeah, this is an interesting question actually, because I just talked with Pak Farid before that mechanical engineering right now is in a good spot to deal with this green jobs situation, because when we are talking about the green jobs, that means you are talking about materials, right? And material science, which is part of the mechanical engineering, is right now is, I believe that I just talked with the guy from CATL a couple of weeks ago. So CATL is the biggest battery manufacturer in the world by far. They held 40% of the market share for EV battery. And they said that the materials for battery is changing very fast. That's why material science, like I said, is in the future sectors in this area. Because the battery itself will become the future of the energy. When we're talking about, not only about cars, but also in the energy storage. Because when we're talking about renewables, you cannot talk about renewables without talking about battery. Without battery, renewables means blackouts. That's what's happening in Australia a couple years ago. In Spain last month, if you've heard, they built a lot of new renewables, but they don't have the energy storage solution. That causes blackouts and a lot of chaos there. And I believe that battery is the future of energy, and material science, especially battery materials, will be in the heart of it. So I think you're in a good position.
Good choice.
Good choice.
Thank you, Pak.
Okay, thank you, Pak Adi, for the insightful answer. So I would like to open another questions. If the audience still have, okay, we have two.
Okay, firstly, yeah, allow me to use Indonesia because my English language is very good. Sebelumnya perkenalkan, nama saya Adit Saputra, panggilan saya Adit. Sekarang saya sekolah di SMK Trimitra kelas 11 jurusan Manajemen Perkantoran dan Layanan Bisnis. Oke Pak, saya punya satu pertanyaan nih. Karena topik kita hari ini adalah menyangkut tentang transisi energi, saya akan mempertanyakan tentang satu bidang saja karena jika kita membahas keseluruhan bidang ini mungkin akan sangat kompleks ya. Saya akan bertanya tentang transisi dari kendaraan bertenaga fosil atau minyak menuju ke kendaraan roda 2 atau roda 4 dengan bertenaga baterai atau listrik itu kan. Saya ingin bertanya tentang bagaimana sih proses transisi pemakaian atau penggunaan atau pembuatan kendaraan bertenaga minyak atau fosil ini menuju kendaraan listrik atau energi itu. Karena mengingat kondisi masyarakat kita saat ini adalah satu keluarga minimal punya satu kendaraan bertenaga minyak atau fosil, termasuk juga saya. Nah, pertanyaannya adalah masyarakat kita saat ini dan berdasarkan data di Indonesia seluruh kendaraan bertenaga minyak itu mencapai 130 juta dan itu hampir mencapai setengah dari populasi masyarakat Indonesia itu sendiri. Nah, dengan sebegitu banyaknya penggunaan kendaraan yang menggunakan bahan bakar minyak atau fosil, bagaimana pemerintah akan melakukan transisi ini secara bertahap dan bagaimana prosesnya? Apakah itu akan mungkin dengan pertama-tama dengan menggunakan edukasi dan pengenalan sosialisasi sehingga nantinya mereka akan paham dan sadar, dan kira-kira akan butuh berapa lama untuk mencapai transisi ini sepenuhnya Pak? Mungkin itu saja dari saya, kurang lebih mohon maaf, terima kasih.
Terima kasih Mas Adit ya tadi ya. Jadi kalau bicara soal transisi ke kendaraan listrik, memang pemerintah itu sudah punya program, ada roadmap, namanya roadmap kendaraan listrik, dan itu cukup ambisius menurut saya. Kita cita-citanya untuk punya, saya lupa angkanya, 8 juta motor kalau nggak salah, roda 2, dan sekitar 300.000 mobil by 2030. Dan itu diwujudkan dengan beberapa kebijakan, salah satunya adalah pemberian insentif untuk kendaraan listrik. Kalau tahun ini sih sudah berakhir ya, saya nggak tahu apakah akan dilanjutkan atau enggak. Ada subsidi kan dulu, 7 juta untuk motor listrik. Kalau untuk mobil listrik itu ada pembebasan PPNBM dan juga pembebasan biaya balik nama. Dan pajaknya juga jauh lebih kecil kan. Nah, ini faktor-faktor yang bisa kita lakukan, kebijakan-kebijakan yang bisa kita lakukan dari pemerintah untuk mendorong adopsi kendaraan listrik. Kalau bicara soal berapa lama, sebetulnya mungkin akan sangat lama ya, karena saat ini kan ada sekitar 120 juta motor di Indonesia, motor kendaraan berbahan bakar bensin. Dan untuk mengganti ini semua mungkin butuh waktu. Pemerintah sendiri saat ini juga punya keterbatasan anggaran untuk melakukan program konversi dan juga mendorong listrik. Tentu kami terus bekerja sama dengan pabrikan untuk menurunkan harga, karena saat ini kan sebetulnya adopsi kendaraan listrik ini mostly masyarakat masih kurang mau. Terakhir saya bicara dengan Grab, itu mereka bilang kalau untuk motor rasa enggan dari pemilik itu lebih ke harga jual kalau tidak salah. Jadi pembeli motor itu nggak mau beli motor listrik karena dianggap nggak ada harganya ketika mereka udah mau jual lagi, gitu. Nah itu mungkin ke depan seiring dengan turunnya harga, kemudian kualitas juga membaik, kita harapkan adopsi dari motor ini akan semakin banyak. Ada yang bilang katanya kalau sudah 5% dari populasi atau dari populasi itu sudah beralih ke listrik, itu akan menjadi satu tren yang nggak bisa dikembalikan lagi seperti yang terjadi di Cina. Ya kita berharap sampai ke sana. Tapi untuk sekarang sih ya kita masih lihat bahwa masyarakat masih belum sepenuhnya percaya ya. Ya nanti kita harapannya sih dengan insentif juga dengan perbaikan dari harga dan juga dari kualitas ini perlahan-lahan bisa bergeser. Seperti itu sih kurang lebih.
Oke,
Cek.
cukup menjawab ya. Baik, terima kasih Pak Adi.
Ada yang mau di
Follow up
Cek.
question? Oke.
Oke, jadi kan kebetulan juga ya Pak, saya kan tinggal di Karawang dan Karawang itu mempunyai beberapa pabrik manufaktur berupa pabrik yang memproduksi kendaraan bermotor seperti Honda, Daihatsu, Toyota, dan yang lainnya. Nah, saya ingin bertanya, jika di masa depan nanti produksi kendaraan listrik Indonesia sudah sangat dominan dan mengalahkan tingkat produksi kendaraan dengan bahan bakar bensin, maka jika kita berbicara hari ini, apa sih kebijakan atau seenggaknya negosiasi yang akan dilakukan oleh pemerintah untuk bisa membuat perusahaan-perusahaan swasta ini itu bisa selaras atau mau mengikuti target yang diupayakan oleh pemerintah dalam beberapa tahun ke depan. Itu Pak. Terima
Ya.
kasih.
Seperti yang tadi saya sampaikan, sebelumnya kan kita punya kebijakan untuk pembebasan, ada insentif subsidi kan, 7 juta per bulan, per NIK untuk motor listrik. Kemudian juga ada pembebasan pajak. Ini hal-hal yang pemerintah lakukan. Tapi tentu kalau misalnya bicara selera pasar kan kita nggak bisa kontrol juga ya. Kita nggak bisa paksa orang untuk, oh kamu nggak boleh lagi jualan motor bahan bakar fosil, cuma boleh jualan listrik. Tentu ini butuh waktu untuk kita transisi. Makanya tadi saya bilang kita juga lagi tunggu untuk harga. Makanya tadi kita bilang ada hilirisasi baterai, itu salah satunya upaya kita untuk menurunkan biaya produksi dan pada akhirnya harga baterai listrik itu sehingga nanti produk akhirnya kendaraan listrik itu bisa lebih murah. Ketika lebih murah, kemudian orang mungkin akan berpikir lebih mudah untuk mengganti kendaraannya menjadi kendaraan listrik. Karena kalau dari segi user experience, kalau Mas Adit pernah nyoba motor listrik, tentu rasanya beda sekali kan dengan motor bensin. Ada yang bilang kalau sudah sekali nyoba kendaraan listrik itu nggak mau balik lagi ke motor karena torsinya, tarikannya, kenyamanannya itu jauh lebih nyaman. Tapi ya lagi-lagi masalah harga masih jadi utama dan itu ya only time yang bisa menolong sih ya R&D dan segala macam. Makanya kita harapkan sih adik-adik di sini yang di jurusan mechanical engineering bisa come up with some breakthrough, bisa berkontribusi terhadap R&D baik itu di bidang material science, kemudian mechanical engineering, supaya kita bisa segera lebih efisien, produksi mobil kendaraan atau motor ini bisa lebih efisien, kita bisa lebih cepat transisinya, seperti itu sih.
Oke. Karena kita ngomongin tentang demand juga ya kadang Mas ya.
Betul.
Dari private companies, terutama big cars producer di Indonesia kayaknya belum ada investment ke EV cars kayak BYD dan lain-lain untuk Toyota, Honda dan lain-lain.
Ya itu if you're talking about Toyota and also Honda and all those Japanese companies, memang they took a different direction dengan pabrikan-pabrikan Cina kan. And I think that's also a good choice to make because frankly speaking they are lagging behind 10 years compared to their Chinese counterpart. If we're talking about electric cars ya, makanya mereka saat ini lebih memilih untuk fokus ke energi yang lain dan itu hidrogen yang saya dengar terakhir. Mereka lebih fokus ke hidrogen,
Iya.
which is good also karena kalau kita bicara soal teknologi, it's good to have options. Kalau teknologi ini ternyata nggak bekerja, kita punya opsi lain loh yang bisa kita lakukan gitu loh. Jadi kita juga nggak bergantung sama satu jenis teknologi sama satu negara yang punya teknologi. Dari sisi pemerintah tentu akan lebih senang kalau ada lebih banyak opsi gitu. Seperti itu sih.
Okay. So I
Masih ada
think
yang mau nanya, Mbak?
yeah, the time limit, but we will allow one more questions. Okay. Let's see if we still can have one more.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Christian Abipraikinchum from Sampurna, majoring in mechanical engineering. So my question, sir, is since you mentioned before, I saw in the slides that Indonesia has the largest nickel reserves, which is makes up of the majority component of a battery. My first main question is, what are the biggest challenges in us capitalizing on this statistics, and why is Indonesia not doing more to ensure that more using the why since we have the biggest reserves, why are we not producing or doing more in-house production of batteries? And I guess my sub question to that is, what are the biggest challenges to the commercialization of batteries, or like to making it cheaper, to make the overall product cheaper? What exactly are the challenges that is maybe stopping more and more investors from coming in to produce them in Indonesia? Is it the research development? Is it the cost of equipment? Or is it maybe the challenges for the standards being proposed by these external investors to come here into the country? So that's my question, sir.
Well, if we're talking about investment, especially in battery, the main issue will be the market. I mean, we do have a lot of nickel here, but nickel is also only one of the component of a battery. So in order to build a good industry, you need a good supply chain. Just like when we're talking about cars, why Toyota, Honda is very successful in Indonesia, because they have built a good supply chain here in Indonesia. That's why they can put the cost down. So when we're talking about battery, last time I talked with CATL, they said that even if we put the nickel price to zero, the cost of producing battery in Indonesia is still higher compared to China. Why? Because the supply chain in China has developed so much that it became very efficient for them to build a battery there. That's why if we're talking about why we cannot bring more and more battery factory here, because we still don't have the supply chain to support that. This is something that the government has been working on for the past 5 years. So we bring the biggest battery company in the world, CATL. The second biggest at that time was LG. Right now they are the fourth biggest, I think. And BYD is also here. BYD is the second biggest battery producer in the world. And we believe that by them coming here, the supply chain that supports them will come also. When the supply chain comes, then all the big battery companies like Gotion and also EV, they will start coming also. And hopefully we can build a big battery business here in Indonesia. So the target is to become one of the world's main supplier of battery outside China. Maybe we are aiming to be the second or the third largest.
So just to clarify your answer, is the supply chain management.
It's the supply chain issue, that's why.
So thank you, sir.
Okay. Can we have one more questions? Fadi?
Sure.
I think this is the last questions, everyone. So please, silakan.
Thank you. Sorry. Sorry for my short pen. It's inappropriate, but I live here and I do my work from home now. So that's why when I see the title of the seminar, it actually attract me a lot. So I work also for energy industry. So my questions, and it's glad to actually have you here, Pak. I believe you are from the Ministry of Energy. So with the fact that we have Paris Agreement in 2014, we know that there is a push globally that we are going to reduce the carbon emission, right? And then in the same time, Indonesia seems to be very enjoying our energy security with the support from the fossil fuel one. So with this kind of situation, and then given the fact that we also have a geothermal resources abundantly, we are the largest in the world. And then we know that there is a demand, especially from the data center, with the AI implementation globally. We know that there is a need for data centers. Google and other companies try to find electricity, the clean one, to provide support to their data center operation. So my question is, what is the strategy from the government of Indonesia with the fact that we are safe right now with the fossil fuel support, but in the same time, there is a demand, like a Google, to actually geothermal utilization for their support, for their operation support. So how do we actually match this kind of situation? How government Indonesia invite Google to come to Indonesia and open their data center here in Indonesia and have the support from geothermal resources. And then that's one. And second, in the same time, how we actually enable the utilization of the fossil fuel one by performing this carbon storage. Because I know that we are still developing this kind of policy, regulation for for carbon storage. So how do we speed up and accelerate these two so we can actually still optimize the opportunity that are now available globally? So that will be my two questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your question. Interesting question. That so for the like what I already told the tenants before. We still need fossil fuel, of course, for our energy security because the usage of oil and gas is still big in our country, and we still import a lot of oil, about more than 500 trillions of oil we import each year. So that's why it's still important to secure oil for our country, because without it, if something happens, if war happens, our country will be put in chaos. That's why the government is still pushing for oil production, for gas production here in the country. But you're correct, these data centers, it's not only data centers actually. Like every major companies who is coming from US or is coming from Europe or is planning or coming from Asia but planning to export to US or to the EU, the first thing they ask is, do we have a good supply of renewable or green energy? That's why in the next RUPTL, 75% of it will be renewable energy and energy storage. That's including geothermal. I forgot the numbers, but I think we will build more than 3 or 4 gigawatts of geothermal energy.
Thank you so much for the answers.
Yeah, the second one, what? I forgot.
Yeah, the second one will be like, the regulation for carbon storage.
Yeah, the government already issued the presidential decree on the carbon storage. And also we already issued the ministerial regulation for carbon storage. Right now, we are in the process of issuing permits for companies interested in developing those storage, because it will took some time to develop those areas into carbon storage. We have a lot of potential, but we will need a lot of investment. And also the regulation to force companies to store their carbon there, it's something that I believe won't be pursued in the short term, because we do still need a lot of investment in our country. And if we add those costs to their operation costs, it will decrease our competitiveness at this time. But over time, we will start introducing those regulation, and hopefully it will help us to achieve our net zero emission goals by 2060. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the answers.
Okay, so I think that's the last questions for today's session.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pak Adi. This is interesting discussions, and you've shared a lot of information that I think a lot of data that is very important for each energy sector that you have shared today. I will not talk a lot about the conclusions of the sessions because we have the closing remarks after this, and Pak Farid will help to conclude the sessions. But once again, I think we heard a lot of things from you about the mix between our needs on energy security, even in the fossil fuels, but also the demands of the investor to come to Indonesia, that they also need the clean and renewable energy. So let's hope that the regulations first for the PLN to implement 75% geothermal will be
Not
70
geothermal, but 70% of renewables.
renewables, not only geothermal, right? Okay, will be real soon. What is the target? Is it in 10 years?
In 10 years
10
time.
years, right? Okay. Let's finger cross for all of this. I think this is a good move from the government, and let's see what can happen in the next future with our EV discussions. This is a very sexy topic, but of course the demand is quite, I think, still quite low in Indonesia. Maybe there's a lot of things that we could also do as a youth. This is our role to also educate how important the renewable energy, the clean energy for Indonesia, because it will create demands, the jobs that already asked before about the mechanical engineer. We will also have create jobs for this renewable energy sector. So thank you so much for all of the audience for the interactive discussion. Once again, thank you very much, Pak Adi, for
You're welcome,
the
Elsa.
information.
Thank you.